Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL. In recent episodes, I've been exploring the topic of leadership. I know there are a lot of leaders listening, and probably even more of you who are going to become leaders at some point. And the fact is that true leadership is, in my opinion, more important to a firm's performance than any technology, especially as we're seeing more and more important decisions being outsourced to AI for the sake of convenience. Real leadership doesn't phone it in like that. So it's my hope that you'll really tune into the message of this episode. Today, I welcome Phil Putnam. Phil is a leadership speaker, author, and former tech leader who's made it his mission to teach organizations how to truly unlock top performance from their people. His give to get approach reframes leadership around a simple yet profound truth. Employees don't work just to make their firm successful. They work to build the lives they desire. And when leaders understand and support that, it doesn't just change careers, it transforms entire lives. Today, we dig into why retaining great talent is financially smarter than replacing them, how firms can intentionally develop leaders instead of relying on chance, and why understanding generational differences is critical for navigating today's workforce. Phil also shares personal stories that highlight the ripple effect of transformational leadership, how a well-led employee can experience life-changing growth that impacts not only their career trajectory, but also their confidence, their relationships, and their future. A key theme from this conversation, which connects to many other episodes on the podcast, is the profound and often underestimated impact that great leadership can have on individuals. True leadership doesn't just get projects done, it elevates people's entire lives, shaping their opportunities, mindset, and fulfillment in ways that last far beyond the workplace. And this is especially relevant in architecture, where traditionally poor leadership has held back countless talented professionals, stunting their careers and limiting their potential for growth. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You can find it directly in your podcast app for this episode if you're a paid member of TRXL Plus, and if you're a free member, you can find them over at the website, which is at trxl.co, where you could also subscribe. Lastly, you can really help out the podcast by sharing the episodes with your colleagues and by commenting and sharing my LinkedIn posts. You can also leave a comment over on YouTube and engage with me and the other listeners there. I came away from this conversation inspired to think differently about how leadership can truly change one's trajectory. And so now, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Phil Putnam. Phil, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. Great to meet you.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah.
Okay, I want to do this a little bit differently today. Normally we jump right into kind of your story and how you got to where you are, but I want to shift it up because it'll make more sense as far as like what we want to accomplish with this conversation, which is, what's your thesis? Like you have this idea and you call it give to get, right? And we can start there and then work back to this point now. Like, how did you get there, right? So let's just start with what give to get is and why we're having the conversation.
Sure. It's really my whole approach to leadership. And so leadership, between leaders and team members, that's my whole specialty. It's become my career now as a speaker and an author. But what it really is it started as kind of an expression of frustration. Because throughout my career, every manager I had, every leader I had, despite their best intentions, and I mean that genuinely, I had some really wonderful leaders that I had this privilege to work with and work under. They just showed a really fundamental misunderstanding of how to motivate people's performance and a real misunderstanding of why we work. And it was very much like, hey, when you give us your best, the company will succeed or the firm will succeed. And isn't that great? And it's like, well, sure. I care.
More for some than others, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I do care about my employer's success, but that's not why I work. I work to get the life I want in exchange for the work that I give. And so over the years, I worked in so many different roles, not in architecture. I work primarily in tech. I have the great fortune to be married to an architect, and I'll tell you a bit about that as we talk.
You make it sound amazing. I'll have to check with my wife on that one.
I can say at least I'm genuinely in awe of my husband. So I mean that with true sincerity and with full affection. But I've worked primarily in tech, and And I just, when I got into a place of leadership, I thought, well, I want to just not ask people to play along, with something that they don't believe in.
Mm.
And so give to get is really the understanding that if you want to be the recipient of your team members' top performance and the best they have to give to your firm or to your organization, you must appeal to their number one career motivation. And that is not to make your firm successful. That is to get the life they desire.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the years, it took many different forms. I really dug into performance motivation in the context of work, and wrote a book about it, developed some frameworks and some methodologies just by common sense and need. When I was in various leadership roles where I had to deliver a lot of results really quickly with a limited amount of resources. But the core of it is that when we know that our job is a pathway to the life that we desire, we're going to be fundamentally motivated to bring our best work every day, because what we want most is being provided by the job situation that we have. And then also it extends our tenure. And because the cost of replacing somebody is so much higher than the cost of satisfying them, it's in every organization's best interest to retain people who are worth retaining by giving them what they want as much as you can.
I have so many questions, and I know you've kind of watched this transformation, I'm sure, play out many times, and maybe even personally. I know you shared a story with me about your husband that you felt like that was really, really impactful, right? And I don't know how, if you had a play in that at all. I mean, obviously a supportive role, but probably not like in your role as doing what you do. Like you probably weren't engaged with the organization at that level for that one.
No, not directly. I'll just tell the story.
Sure.
It's a good way to kind of root into the conversation. So my husband, his name is Raj Karnik, and he works for Gensler. In their New York City office. We live in New York City. For those who are watching the video, you're seeing our apartment behind us. Welcome to our home. And so he is currently the design manager of the JFK New Terminal 1 project. So huge.
Small project, just a little.
Just a tiny little, aviation project.
How many $1 billion is that project?
I believe it's 6.5.
Yeah, just a few billion.
It's the project, right? And of course, I'm out here doing my little leadership talks and my cute little book, and he's rebuilding one of the most important airports in the world. So it definitely keeps things in perspective, which is nice. Right. But he has worked in the architecture industry for a long, long time in various firms. And when he got to Gensler, we both went into new jobs during COVID, and they very passionately recruited him, which right there was a great compliment. And he is somebody who just naturally works hard, and he doesn't really expect a lot of recognition, to be honest.
I think that's a lot of architects are in that boat, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, it's like a natural thing, but it's also a training thing, right? And it's also an expectation. Like the business kind of demands that at a really high level.
Yeah. I also want to say, for context, this was when he joined Gensler, he was in his late 30s, now in his early 40s. So that point in an architect's career where you're kind of going to either escalate or not, and also the point in an architect's career where you might really start benefiting financially from an escalation if it happens. So he gets into Gensler, and almost immediately, I just start hearing him say things when he's coming home from work that make me think, wow, I think their leaders might really, really, really be good at this. And just consistently, he's coming home saying, oh my gosh, guess what happened today? Guess what happened today? And example, one of the things that stuck out to me most is he came home on a Tuesday. I don't know when it was, but it was on Tuesday. And he says, hey, guess what? The studio manager asked me if I want to learn about the financial aspect of running a project. And I said, yes, of course I want to learn that. Great. That's so exciting. I'm so glad they initiated. I know that's something you want. And then Thursday of that same week, so 2 days later, he comes home just beaming. He says, you're never going to guess what happened. he says that studio manager poked his head out of his office today and said, "Hey, I've got an hour. Do you want to come in and kind of go over the initial basics of running the finances of a project?" And I looked at him and I said, "Do you know how rare that is?"
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And he said, "What?" And
It's
I
like
said,
the rarity of asking, but then the rarity of the follow through and it happening in such a short period.
"I
right?
know."
All of those things. Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, what was rare about it?" And I said, "Well, first of all, it was volunteered, and then you didn't have to chase after this person for several months
Right.
and then get them into a beleaguered 15-minute conversation to do something they volunteered to do."
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a real kind of another deeper level for me of, wow, these leaders really, they are committed to developing their people and really investing in the people that they see great potential and talent in. And then not long after that, the way that Raj talks about himself started to change. And he started to say things and express levels of confidence and self-confidence and self-worth and vision for his future of his career that I honestly never knew if I would hear come out of his mouth.
Hmm.
Now, I know what he's capable of. Like I said, I am in awe of this man, not just as a human, but also as an architect, as a professional, and as a leader. He is a remarkably gifted natural leader. And so, but I didn't know if he would ever fully see himself in that way. And it became sort of this fun game for me to sort of float different pieces of language. Like I started saying to him, "Raj, you're a star." And just kind of wondering, am I ever going to hear this come out of his mouth as a genuine expression of what he believes about himself? And I crap you not mere weeks after one of the times I said it, it came out of his mouth. And I just was so moved by the fact that the care and the expertise that his leaders at Gensler have in people leadership have actually changed his life.
Mm-hmm.
And then have changed our lives. You know, they've changed our relationship as a couple. They've changed our future. They've changed what it's like to be in our home together. You know, I even get a little teary while I'm talking about it because that's what incredible leaders can do. And I just never dreamed that I would be able to count my spouse's managers among the village of the people that care for him and that are a part of making his life better. Yeah. Like I feel like I've got teammates in caring for my husband, and to be able to say that it's his leaders and several of his senior leaders as well is just a privilege I never thought that I would get to participate in.
So the way that he started bringing these things home, I mean, it sounds like there was a contrast to previous experience. Is that
there were? Yeah, and it's not really my place to go into those details, but I can say that, yeah, this is a definite contrast from some previous experiences.
Yeah, and so like it is kind of dependent on the people and the culture and many things, right? And so it's interesting that the way you're talking about it though is like this is really an intentional thing that you have seen in the leaders. It sounds like leaders in the office in that and Gensler in New York City, and maybe it's beyond that, but it sounds like, and I bring that up just because like it is, the things that you're talking about are skills that can be learned and that can be invested in, not just by individuals, but by companies, by firms, right? And so I know that that's something that you know a lot about, and so you're starting to make the case of why it matters, right? And because I think there's this is a choice that firms have to make, and firms don't have to make it for you. You could choose to invest in yourself, and you could learn about these things, and you could learn what the benefits are to others and what they are to yourself, what leadership is and what it isn't. But I think it's just important to say that these are things that can be learned. These aren't just innate in people, right? Mm-hmm. And showing that interest, like when I was at my last firm, we actually had a group of emerging leaders that focused on learning about leadership, and we would pick who came in to speak to us from the firm to speak on different things, we would read books on leadership. We would discuss those books. We would talk about how things were being handled in the firm and what we may or may not do differently and why, and bring in people and talk through those things, because there's usually more than meets the eye, right? So anyway, I just want to bring that up because like this isn't something that happens by itself, and it's not something that happened like it probably rarely happens by accident. Like this is something that is intentionally put into place. So I'm just curious, from your point of view, like how do people actually start to make that happen? And I'm sure we could talk about additional kind of benefits of leadership and action.
Sure. It really, I think it starts with a genuine belief among the most senior leaders at a firm or at a business that this is worthwhile. It really does have to be a system and an ethos by design. It becomes part of the fabric of the culture of an organization, but it also has to be part of their operations and their finances. And that's where I think a lot of these efforts derail. They think it's just a culture project. No. Culture is usually handled as a side, like a side rail, so to speak, of the actual core operations of a company. But your personnel, your people, they are essential to the core operations of your company. So you can't think about it as a cute little side project, or like something that's got an end date on it. With Gensler in specific, from my observation, from the outside, because they've been around for so long and because they're so large, they have had the time to decide, yes, we are going to be an organization that prioritizes people development. We're going to spend the money on it that it costs, and we're going to implement systems into not just the culture, but the operations of our company to make sure that this happens. So I think that's where it starts. It comes from a point of view and a genuine belief and conviction among the people who have the most power to say the benefits of truly investing in our people are undeniable, unquestionable, and they're worth the time and the money. And it's not a short-term endeavor. And so that's where it starts. The other thing is that it does cost money. It is a financial choice. But the cost of doing it is so much lower than the cost of not doing it. So of course, in any industry, but especially in architecture, money is always a really, really big issue, right? So just here are some figures. Across all industries, Forbes and Gallup have found together that the cost of replacing somebody is anywhere between 50 to 200% of their salary. That's just for an individual contributor. For a middle manager, it's 271% of their salary. And for a senior VP or then like a principal or the top shelf of a firm, it's going to be over 400%. And that is just the cost of the entire process of finding and sourcing and placing the replacement, and then getting that replacement to 1 year in the seat, and the loss of productivity as they ramp up to full speed. It does not include the cost of paying that replacement during the first year.
Oh, wow.
So to put it in perspective, the middle of that range is 150% to replace. If you have somebody who makes $100,000, you're going to spend, I think, what is it, $150,000 or $150,000 to replace them. If they make $150,000, you're going to spend $225,000 to replace them. Now, if you're in a 100-person firm and you're running 15% attrition, which is remarkably low by comparison across industries right now, but let's say you're great, and you're only running 15% attrition, and you need to stay at 100 people, you know how much you're spending to replace 15 people who make $150,000? You're spending
I'm not good.
No, I've got the numbers.
Good.
You're spending $3.4 million.
Wow.
To replace those 15 people, just to stay at neutral in your staffing plan, and almost all of that $3.4 million is unproductive cost.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I really enjoy explaining to leaders who think that, oh, it's too expensive or it's a side project, it's a nice to have, to really invest in leadership skills, and then leadership skills that can help you nurture your staff and retain them. Because I don't know anybody who has $3.4 million just to throw around
Yeah.
on an
Yeah.
annual basis.
Let's take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about AVAIL. Is your team struggling to find the BIM assets they need? AVAIL's content management system simplifies access to all of your firm's content in one easy-to-use platform. No matter where your files live or what type of files they are, you can easily search and access them from AVAIL. Now, designers can consistently find and reuse all types of content. So what does that mean? Well, standards compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic. New hires are easier to onboard. Projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. You get the idea. Visit getavail.com to try Avail for free and request a free demo. That's getavail.com, GETAVAIL.com. My thanks to Avail for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now let's get back to the conversation. It's interesting to think about it from this kind of investment strategy and like a culture strategy, which you're talking about, and from operationals, right? Like the money side of things. The thing that I think I've experienced and I've witnessed in architecture is this kind of an unending line of candidates at the door, like ready to replace, because the educational system does put out a lot of graduates, probably more than the industry actually needs, right, to do the work. But there is a lot of turnover, and there are a lot of, I would say, culture, not fits. Like what's the word for that? Like they just don't fit with the company culture,
Sure.
right? And so that's maybe a down, one of the bad things about the interview process that could be addressed there too. But so we see this turnover, and we see, like, I think a lot of times the attitude in leadership is like, we'll find somebody else. And just like the counterpoint of what you're bringing up here is that, like, this costs serious money to have that kind of an attitude. We'll just get somebody else.
Well, yeah. And I want to expand on this a little bit too, because that's a common refrain I hear especially from senior leaders and CEOs and such who I work with or who I speak to, is that, oh, well, especially in this job market, we can just hire somebody else. It doesn't matter. Everybody should feel lucky to have a job. I think it's the other way around, because please show me how you're going to run your business without people, even in the age of AI. But also, yeah, you might be able to replace a skill set. Somebody might have a comparable skill set, right? But like you talked about, cultural fit. You talked about maybe how the clients feel about them. There is much more to the value of an employee than just the productivity. The hours they book, the drawings they do. There's so much more to it. And also, when it comes down to it, clients, they make decisions based upon who does great work, but they also make decisions upon who they want to be around. I mean, buying is humans handing a huge piles of money to other groups of humans. So the human aspect of this is a huge part of the value of an employee. You can replace somebody with somebody who's younger and costs less and probably is less skilled, but that doesn't mean that's going to be a smart move for your business. And also, you're still going to pay more to replace somebody than you ever would to have to satisfy them. And I'll just say this, while we're on the topic of money, the cost to satisfy someone. Well, so PayScale, which is one of the world's leading organizations in researching compensation, trends, strategies, figures, etc. In 2024, the average pay increase for top performance without a promotion was 4.5%. And that's more than most people in architecture and tech get. But that's the average across all industries. The amount of a raise that it takes to satisfy somebody and make them stay in their job and like recommit and do their best work is between 5 and 10%. So it's not even 1% more than the average increase across industries. And then, okay, let's say you go hog wild. You give somebody a 10% raise, right? Well, that's still a hell of a lot less than paying 150% of their salary to replace them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was you who told me this, so forgive me if it was, but this idea of like how, and I guess it was in terms of like financial, let's just call it benefit to the company, but moving people up in position, stature, leadership, seniority is maybe more timeline based, but like the idea of it is super, super beneficial to firms to do that as quickly as possible. Is that something that I heard from you, or do you agree with that if it wasn't something I heard from you?
It's not something you heard from me.
Okay.
I would need to know the context to say whether I agree with it or not. I think there could be some situations where it's beneficial, but can you tell me sort of the animating thinking behind
Yeah,
that?
well, it's not like just for the sake of getting people into those positions, but the idea was that you are developing people consistently and quickly so that they can earn your business more money. Like, I mean, that's part of it, but you're also building into those people. So there's a cultural aspect to it as well and ramifications.
True. I can definitely see the logic there. I think that, for decades now, the concept of making sure that salary increases and promotions happen slowly and very, very modestly is kind of cornerstone of the way that most businesses
Yes.
operate financially.
Right.
It makes no sense when you look at what motivates humans to bring their
Right.
best work to your company. So this idea that we need to string people along,
Yep.
and train them, like hammer down their expectations to not expect more than a 3% raise once a year for 5 years. And then maybe you get voted to become an associate when you're 35. And then maybe you'll become a
There's a
senior.
bunch of arbitrary rules around this kind of stuff.
Exactly,
It's just,
right?
Yeah, right.
And maybe you'll be a senior associate by the time you're 40, and it's just, and for architecture in specific, from what I've learned from Raj and his friends I've spent time around, also, promotions tend to happen later in the age arc by comparison to other industries as well. So the thing that the context in which all of that mishigas is happening is the people's lives. So they're getting married. They need to buy houses. I have kids. They want to expand their lives. Their life desires are evolving and expanding and becoming more expensive to fulfill at a much more rapid and consistent rate than employers ever think about compensating their people. And so what happens is that when a team member, especially someone who's valuable to you, realizes I cannot get the life I desire from the job I have, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, right.
Peace out.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that person is not going to sit there and say to themselves, oh, you know what? I don't actually want to have a kid. That's not real. What I want to do is I want to stay working at this firm who won't help my life move forward. That's what I want to do. I actually love my boss's goals for their firm more than I love my goals for my own life.
Yeah.
Now, when I say it like that, of course it sounds ridiculous, but I promise you, because I've been this person, I've been this leader, that is exactly the way that leaders think when they are in that situation, whether they are conscious of it or not.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that quip that you made, which we've heard. It's a common trope, right? It's that you should be lucky that you have the job instead of the other way around, right?
Yeah.
Goes back to that.
And this is where we kind of get into another one of my specialties, which is cross-generational leadership. So, there's 4 generations now in the full-time adult workforce. You got baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And each of those four generations has a very different relationship with employment and relationship with income. But the majority of the global workforce today is millennials and Gen Zers combined. They're currently 55% of the global workforce. And that data is derived from the US Census Bureau. And then by the year 2035, those two generations will be 65% of the global workforce. And that's because the younger half of Gen Z are currently between 13 and 19 years old. So they're not even, most of them aren't even in full teenagehood yet, let alone in the adult workforce.
Right.
So there, it's easy for older leaders to think they know best, to assume that their relationship with employment and with income can just be laid onto those two generations that are going to be 2/3 of the global workforce. And man, oh man, are they wrong.
Well, yeah, because there's also this aspect of they need to do it the way that I did it. What I went through also must be gone through by the next generation and the next generation, right? And it's like this non-acknowledgement that things are actually different now.
Yeah, and I'll just relay it through a couple stories of these two generations, and I'll self-identify. I am a Gen Xer. I have a very traditional Gen X relationship with employment. I'll unpack what that means later.
Yes, I'd love to hear what that means.
But it's a trip, let me tell you. But so I was teaching a workshop at a conference back in October of 2024. And I was lucky to have people from all four generations in my workshop. So I was like, this is too good to pass up. Let's just talk. And so we kind of round robined, and I just had a person from each generation share their thoughts on the topics we were going over. And it was
real quick. Are these people all in the same firm? Are they just coming from different places?
Totally
Do they know
different
each other?
firms, right?
Okay,
Some
so
of us knew each other. We were all in the same industry, but different companies, right?
Okay.
And actually, I'm going to raise my chair because it's tired and it sinks down and it makes me want to talk to lunch game. So anyway, so the person, the millennial who spoke up, we were talking about, kind of what's your relationship with employment. And she said, I don't think I will ever be able to retire. And it was honestly the first time that this possibility had ever occurred to me. And I was like, wait.
It's not your reality, right?
Yeah, not my reality.
Right.
So I said, can you please tell me, specifically, what do you mean? And she said, I believe that I will never be able to stop generating fresh income. I will literally work until I physically cannot work anymore.
Because she can't afford to stop. That's what you're
exactly
saying?
And she's okay. I don't believe the social safety net in America will be there for me. I don't believe Social Security and Medicaid will be there when I hit that age. And the money I can make now I don't think it's going to last, in a traditional, retirement fund. And I'd never considered that before. And I said, well, do you, when you and your friends who are same age get together, is this common among you guys? Like, oh yeah. And I asked the other millennials in the room, oh yeah, we don't think we'll ever be able to retire.
I believe that. Yeah.
So that's one thing. And
that's a common conversation, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I asked her, okay, then what does that do to your relationship with employment and your priorities? How does that change how you show up for work, how you look for work, and how you make
Great
decisions
question.
about work?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I really look for organizations that focus a lot on work-life balance. Because I have to enjoy my time while I can. There's no such thing as me waiting until I retire to travel. There's no such thing until waiting for retirement to do anything. She said, so I have to make sure that they are committed to work-life balance. They have to have incredible health insurance because I have to stay as healthy as possible for as long as I can so I can keep working. And she said, and I have to make sure that I enjoy life now. So vacation matters to me. I'm going to take vacation now. I'm not going to answer emails on vacation. If that's a problem for a boss, that's not going to be a problem I'm going to care about. I have to get what I need from my life now because I don't think I'll ever stop working. That's the millennial story. Here's the Gen Zer story. I was at an architect birthday party, which actually is super fun.
Okay.
Not that we were like playing Legos or anything. Well, we just like at a bar in New York, and it was one of my husband's friends, and he was also a friend of mine, wonderful person, and so we're all great mixed group there. And so I got into this conversation with this brilliant 26-year-old woman about these topics because I'm so fun at parties.
What's your relationship to employment?
Well, how do you feel about your paycheck? Exactly, real casual stuff. So this brilliant woman named Angie, and she's a Gen Zer. And so we started talking about this stuff. And I said, well, what are your thoughts on this? And she said, I genuinely believe the earth will not outlive me.
Yeah.
And now I knew...
this is another common conversation in that age.
I knew this
sure.
Intellectually, but this is the first time I experienced it in person. So I said, wow, okay, so tell me what you mean. And she said, I think the earth will become uninhabitable before my natural life is over, or it will deteriorate to the point where it will shorten my life and I'll die younger than I could have otherwise. And I said, okay, well, what does that do to your thoughts about employment? And she said, it means that I don't really care if I'm 5 minutes late for your 10-minute meeting or your 10 a.m. meeting. And I don't really care if there's no errors on the Excel spreadsheet that I'm sending to you. She's like, I'm pretty much a nihilist. I'm only working to get whatever enjoyment out of life I can while I can, because who knows how long we're going to be here. And I said, is this common among, you and other people your age? She's like, yeah, most of my friends feel the same. And now because I'm predisposed to care about this stuff, so I really took all this to heart. But what I then say about this to leaders who are not open to this, who think it's just whining or entitlement or selfishness or being over dramatic, is that it doesn't really matter if you agree with them or not. Like, your approval of their fears and desires, that's not a test they need to pass.
It doesn't matter to me.
They're 2/3 of the global workforce.
Right.
And what they believe about work and life will decide how they will behave in work and life, and will decide if they're going to come work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be willing to ask yourself as a leader, if I spend the next 10 years alienating 2/3 of the global workforce, what's the future of my business?
Is there one? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think first of all, if you're a leader, you're a servant, period. If you don't want to be a servant, you don't belong in a leadership chair. Get out. You're harming people. I mean that. That is my ethos. I don't flinch on that at all.
Yeah.
I know there's plenty of leaders who don't think like that, and I think they're wrong. If you're a leader, you're a servant. And when leaders stand in judgment of their people's desires, they miss the truth that you cannot judge someone and serve them at the same time. You could judge someone and help them at the same time. But that's not service, that's pity. And let me tell you, pity does not motivate people's performance.
Right.
So it really is the responsibility of the leaders to take their people's perspectives and needs seriously. And then also look honestly at the financial impact of not doing so.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely mystified, honestly, that I talk about this business case on the cost of replacement versus the cost of satisfaction incessantly. It's literally my business to do so. And I am stunned at how consistently people just don't care. And coming from the tech world, the absolute obsession among leaders in the tech world is profitability. You're trying to get your company to profitability so it can get more money from your venture capital fund, or it can go public, or it can whatever your goal is, you need to achieve profitability. And what mystifies me that leaders don't care about the cost of replacing people is because profit is revenue minus cost.
Yeah, directly applies to the bottom line. Yeah.
And if you're willingly incurring millions of dollars of unnecessary cost every year, you are willingly adding obstacles to your path to profitability. Why more leaders don't care about this, I have no explanation for, at least not a logical one.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company AVAIL, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I mean, can you talk about kind of maybe the how? I mean, you've laid out the why it matters, and let's just keep it kind of broad. I think is it how do people start to? You talked about becoming basically a servant leader, right? And the idea of what leadership is. One of my favorite kind of frameworks of leadership is that it's a burden. Like a lot of people aspire to be leaders. They aspire to be leaders because of perception and maybe pay or this or that. But it's not like that. That to me is for the wrong reasons. Like it doesn't align with what you were just saying about service-based leadership. And leadership, it is difficult, and it's. I think more people aspire to it than should. I guess is the way that what I'm trying to say, right? Because it's not. If you frame it that leadership is a burden, I don't mean that in it's a challenge. Like it is a difficult job, and it takes a specific skill set, and you can do harm in it if you don't think about it like that, or you don't have that skill set, or you haven't developed that skill set yet. And so therefore, like you're making it worse than making it better just by calling yourself a leader. But if you don't have actually the traits that we're talking about, then you shouldn't be there, right? So how do you actually start? Because I think, I think of the word empathy, I think of the word compassion, I think of these things, I think about just relationship. I think about getting to know people and what do they care about across the board, right? And I think there's a lot of quote unquote leaders, especially in AEC, maybe not especially in AEC, but in AEC, who don't take the time to get to know their people. This level of care is not there. The caring of what people care about, what are they doing, what's happening in their lives, where are they in their architectural registration exams, where are they in their profession, where are they in their career, where do they want to go, where are their passions, what do they do outside of work? There's so many easy questions to ask. Maybe they're easy because I'm an interviewer, right? But I don't think that these are just normal conversational questions to ask. And they're not even best served in the office a lot of times. A lot of times it's like, let's get out of here. Let's go talk, right? Let's get out of this container and go to a place where it's just like that. There's no pressure to, it's not come into my office and close the door and let's have a conversation about this. It's like, no, let's go hang out. And so I'm just curious, like the how part. How do people start to, if they are interested in this true definition of leadership, this development of people and culture and retention and all of these things, give some people some tools that they can start to look at to develop those skills in their life and in their career?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is this, like to those who don't want to be leaders, great, don't be.
Yeah.
You have absolute permission to spend your entire career as a non-leader and be as happy as possible, right? So I think one of the biggest disservices that the world has done to all professionals is the narrative that if you're not in management by X age, you're deficient. There's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I see that lie starting to get exposed and get weakened, in many industries. It's still pretty strong, but the thing that I think is first, everybody has the absolute right to ask themselves, do I want to care for other people? Is that what I want to do when I go to work every day? Do I want to facilitate the success of others? Or am I more interested in just doing what I need to do and reaping the benefits? Saying yes to either of those things is great, as long as you're being honest with yourself. And so I think that's the first thing I want to say, is to anybody who doesn't actually have a genuine desire to facilitate the success of other people and to drive business results through people's behavior, you don't have to be a leader.
Yeah. Can I just jump into that? Because I think that is so appropriate, especially for the audience of this podcast, which I think is generally made up of really high performers. And it's a really tough transition to go from working in really technical architectural, it's like technology, architecture, like the overlap of that is probably pretty much where everybody who's listening to this podcast sits. And going to become a manager, and let's just call that a team manager, a people manager, is a really difficult shift because it's a completely different skill set. And I think a lot of times people have been told and believe that you need to become this next step on the ladder, like you just mentioned, right? And so therefore there's this kind of internal pressure and maybe external pressure to do that. And it's really important what you just said, which was it's not for everyone. And because it is literally not for everyone, not everyone should aspire to do that. And you should think about that when you're considering moving into that position, because if it's literally something you can't or don't want to do, you should not do it.
Yeah, and to me, it comes down to honor yourself first. If that's not the experience you want, if you don't dream about that, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And you honor yourself.
It would be torture
first.
at some level. It could be very torturing.
And I think that before you're in it, you don't understand, you fundamentally spend your time differently at work every day. You do different things. You don't do a lot of the things you did before.
Right.
To be like an example, we were at another architect dinner party
Sounds like
recently.
you party. Yeah, you party a lot.
Party real hard with the police. Not saying they're raging, I'm saying they happen. And it was most people around my age, my husband's age, were in our mid 40s, and so a lot of them were saying they don't really draw anymore. They can't think of the last times that they directly had their hands on a set of plans. They're mostly in meetings, they're mostly leading projects, they're mostly developing other talent, developing the people that are on their teams. And a couple of them I could tell were sort of sad about it. Like, I really miss drawing. Like, I really miss just losing myself, in a set of drawings for 6 hours. One of them even said they miss overnighters every once in a while, all-nighters. And I can relate to that, honestly. But that's the first thing. If you don't want the actual reality of facilitating other people's success, you don't have to do it. And it's going to be better for everybody, especially yourself, if you don't. If you do want it and you think, yeah, I could actually be good at this, I think it starts with curiosity, honestly. Because again, your job as a leader, when you become a leader, your job is to deliver the success of your team members to your business as a whole. That's your job. And so in order to do that, you have to understand what each of the people who you serve as a leader, what each of them are trying to get in exchange for the work that they give. This is the give to get thing that we started with.
Yep.
So you can actually understand, first of all, do you actually have a chance of getting their top performance? Like, is it possible for them to get what they want from this job? And if it is, what levers do you pull on to make sure that happens? And so I was in this position. I'm getting to the how that you asked about. I was in this position when I first became a leader. And like most leaders, especially in tech, you got to produce a really large result in a really short amount of time with a really limited amount of resources. And so I just common sensed it one day. And I asked myself, okay, well, what's the best way to get someone to give me what I want? Well, it's to give them what they want. And what's the best way to find out what someone wants? You ask them.
You ask them. Yeah, it's actually very simple.
But you have to be curious enough.
You do. I love that you use that word, and I mean I could relate that like to this podcast itself, right? It's like the success of this podcast and the insane guests that have come on the show, right? To, you know, as far as like global presence, leadership is, it's this curiosity that I have to reach out and ask them if they will come on the show and then have the conversation with them. But it's through that conversation that I learned so much about them and what their passions are. Why does this matter? Why do they do what they do? I mean, this is a framework that anybody is free to copy, right? Like it's not, there's no trademark here. This is literally the thing. And at the same time, I think a lot of people, and maybe I'm curious if you see this, but a big mistake that a lot of leaders or managers make is that they just assume that what motivates others is the same thing that motivates them. And that they have the same, very similar aspirations. And I think that is that. I mean, this kind of gets back into this lack of curiosity that often exists, or maybe just the, you know, I just don't have time for that kind of a thing. It's a drag.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a good place to go back to explaining the Gen X relationship with employment.
All right.
You want to do that?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. So, Gen Xers on the whole were raised by parents who were baby boomers. So we got to back up to baby boomers a little bit. A baby boomer's relationship with employment in general, I acknowledge I'm generalizing here, is really based around loyalty, right? They are loyal to their employer even when they hate them with the fires of hell, you know, because sticking with an organization or a group of people, including through the hard times, is a mark of good character. It's a character value for that generation. And it's not hard to understand why. It's because baby boomers are the children of the soldiers of World War II and the spouses and families of the soldiers of World War II. And so literally chain of command and following orders when you didn't fully understand why and putting the needs of the many over the needs of the individual is how the generation of World War II literally saved the world. Mm-hmm. And then all those soldiers came home and they birthed the baby boomers and birthed suburbia and birthed the first generation of knowledge work in the United States. And they just took that chain of command and that loyalty-based relationship with life and with work and laid it into their family environments and into the companies that they founded and lead.
Yep.
So you've got baby boomers who are like, you don't switch employers. Also, they're deeply afraid of change and they're deeply afraid of having any gap in income. And so their relationship with work is you're loyal, it'll pay off if you're loyal, and you stick with it because you need a paycheck and you don't want to destabilize your ability to pay your bills and care for your family. And by the way, that loyalty paid off for baby boomers because there were pensions and unions and lifetime benefits and meaningful employer contributions to retirement funds. Also, they were at the tail end of the conglomerate model of business, which basically was like maintain the largest possible workforce and get them to work for you for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. That was the dominant organization of business and relationship between management and workers at the time. Gen Xers, we had that expectation of loyalty imbued into us by our baby boomer parents. And also that judgment, which is if you're not loyal and if you switch employers, you're not a good human. Mm-hmm. So the Gen Xers' relationship with employment in general is we are the most devoted. We're super loyal to organizations for around 20 years. And then there's usually a moment of disillusionment. You get laid off, whatever, something happens, the curtain gets pulled off your eyes, and you realize that that loyalty was always one-sided. It was toxic loyalty. Mm-hmm. And for any generation in the workforce today, past baby boomers, loyalty is not paid off, period. It's a Ponzi scheme. You put in and you put in, you put in that loyalty, and when you need to draw upon it, there's nothing there for you. I'm saying Ponzi scheme as a metaphor, not literally.
Not literal. Yeah.
So what happens with Gen Xers is we are the most committed, most reliable employees. Also, we believe that up to a certain point, up to a point of disillusionment, like we're super committed, and then we have our moment of disillusionment. We realize employment is a game, and then who knows what's going to happen. Right? Up until our moment of disillusionment, if you ask us, why don't you have what you want in your life yet? We will most likely tell you, because I haven't worked hard enough. You know? But as you've talked a couple times about the people, the leaders who just assume that other people will want and respond to what they want and respond to. Yeah, baby boomers often get tagged with that, but Gen Xers are actually a lot worse at that than baby boomers are. Gen Xers are probably the most judgmental generation in the workforce right now.
Why is that?
Because we are driven by excellence and by recognition. And we believe that you have what you earn. And when you expect to get something without fulfilling our definition of earning it, we get offended. So whereas boomers struggle with empathy, Xers struggle with sympathy. And we're like, no, you have to suffer the way that we suffered. Why do you expect things you haven't earned yet? It's the classic model of a conversation when a millennial or a Gen Z employee goes to their Gen X boss and says, I need a bigger raise and I need them more frequently because I can't pay my bills. And the Xer is like, well, you don't just get a raise because you asked for one. And it's not my fault that you need one. That's the fault of the market. Like, why do you feel entitled to things you haven't earned yet? And especially if it's a millennial asking for it, for them, their thing is like, well, time is money. Like, I'm never going to be able to retire. I entered the workforce during the 2008 housing crisis. That set me back on my life milestones 5 to 10 years. Like, legit, that's what really happened. And no matter how many people want to turn it all into a punchline and make fun of them for it, no, they got jacked.
Yeah.
And so they're like, I cannot afford to spend my time in an environment that will not meaningfully escalate my financial picture. So I can't play along with this idea that I got to wait 5 years to earn a paltry raise. Like, that's not going to work for me.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to tell you about something that I think is pretty great and you might be interested in it. And that is my exclusive newsletter available only to paid members of TRXL Plus that I call Leadership Edge. If you're looking to stay ahead of the curve in architecture and technology, Leadership Edge delivers insights that you won't find anywhere else. Why? Well, because they are my deep dives into the podcast conversations, just like the one that you're listening to in this episode, to give you an edge on the industry. Each edition of the newsletter provides key insights for forward-thinking leaders seeking innovation in AEC who are short on time, offering the context of each conversation without the need to listen to the full episode. I've actually designed them, though, to keep you updated, spark your interest, and encourage you to tune into the full episodes if those ideas resonate. And the best part is that they are packed with actionable takeaways to help you navigate the future of practice. By becoming a paid supporter, you get Leadership Edge delivered right to your inbox, and it's a direct way to support my podcast while getting exclusive, valuable content to sharpen your leadership mindset. You can join today at trxl.co and start receiving my Leadership Edge newsletters. Just click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit the link that I put in the show notes. Thanks. Now back to the conversation. I just want to throw in a couple other things into this that I've seen happen in this kind of relationship that you're talking about between these two different generations. And that is, okay, well then tell me, what do I need to do to get to that thing? And I think a lot of times it's ambiguous at best. It's just like, just keep doing what you're doing, or a couple more years of, and it's like, a
And
couple more years? Is that 1? Is that 3? Like, where is that? And what are the literal things that you want to see from me? And it's like, no, you're doing great.
so
It's not engaged.
right. And it's so tone deaf on the
Yeah.
on the part of the manager in that situation, because what the employee has just told you is, I can't waste time.
Yeah.
And your response is, just wait longer.
Just wait a little longer.
Just
Yes,
wait
the
a
Ace
little
Ventura
longer.
line. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, just wait a little
Exactly.
longer. Right?
Do it the way I did it, because it's the way that I did it.
Right.
And it worked out for me. And so, but now going back to your question of what do you do about it, right? The curiosity is critical, but this is what I did. So I had to hire a couple people on my team, and I was also inheriting a team member who was there before I joined this company. So I just thought, well, I'm going to find out what they want. And I'm going to talk to them like a human. And most importantly, I am not going to ask them to pretend like they will ever love this company's goals more than they love what they're trying to get in exchange for the work that they give. Let's just give up on that whole farce. And so whether I was interviewing a job candidate or talking with my employee that I was inheriting, I would say, hey, as much as you feel comfortable, this is fully voluntary, but if you just want to accept, let's just set aside the job for a second. And would you tell me about the life that you're trying to build? Tell me about the life you desire for yourself and your loved ones. And then I'm going to honestly tell you if you can get it here. Because if you can, that's party time.
Yeah.
I'm going to get everything I need from you every day.
Everybody wins. Yeah.
Yeah, with a minimal amount of friction, and you're going to get what you need for your life. But if you can't, you're going to eventually realize it. If you haven't already, you're probably not going to tell me when that happens. And why should you? It puts you at risk, makes you vulnerable as an employee. And then you're going to go, look for another job somewhere else, and you're going to leave and get what you need. Another organization is going to benefit from your brilliance, and my company's going to have to pay the cost of replacing you. Everybody loses. And so I think that the tactics are important. And I created a framework for it, and I'll talk you through it in a second. But I do think the intention matters greatly. A leader has to believe that, or they have to accept the fact that an employee's number one career goal is to get the life they want. And any concern for their employer's success is a second place motivation at best. And then they have to be willing to be honest with that employee and honestly assess the likelihood of them getting that life from their current job situation. Because if they can't get it, it's going to end anyway. And the best thing you can do in that situation, if they can't get the life they want, is tell them and say, hey, I don't want to waste your time. Just human to human. The worst thing I can do to you is occupy your time when you can't get what you want most here.
Yeah. Before we get to your framework, I mean, so is it critical, ideal, I should say, that this actually happens during the interview process then, so that you're literally not wasting that time? I mean, let's just say I'm going to be hiring somebody, right, to do this thing. Is that when you bring this up? It seems like it's too late after you hire them, although it's probably never too late to start these conversations. But I'm just saying, it's not ideal at that point.
Sure. Never too late. But yes, I do it in every single job interview. I do. Whether I'm the hiring manager or not, because, now all interviews are by committee. But yeah, I do it in every single job interview. And it's really essential because it's part of me also knowing, am I going to be able to, is this a smart hire? And the way that hiring happens to me is so silly these days, because 96% of the effort is spent on establishing capability fit. 4 to 5% of the time is spent establishing cultural fit, and no time is dedicated to establishing desire fit, which is really the true engine of whether this person's going to perform the way you need them to or not. And whether they're going to be there a year from now, or if you're going to be going through this process again. And just going back to the math, if it takes more than a year's worth of someone's salary to hire them, It means you need them to be there at least 2 years or more for you to break even on the investment
Mm,
of hiring them and paying them.
mm,
You won't make
mhm.
money on that hire until probably after 2 years have passed. But if your leadership skills are so poor that you can't keep people around for 2 years,
You are
you're
literally
just
losing money.
you're
Yeah.
literally
Hmm.
have a financial operation designed to fail.
Mm,
Um, so that's the larger context there. Yeah.
yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing all that up. I mean, there's so many things to kind of, it's great to reassess the way we do things all the time. And I think a lot of times we just accept the way that, the hiring process is what the hiring process is. It's this checklist that HR gave me if you work in a larger company, or it's you're at the mercy of the committee and what the committee asks. I think it's super important that you bring it up even when you're not the hiring manager, to make it part of the conversation so that everybody in the room is aware of what the answers are, right? Because and then it's like, well, why does that matter? You can have that conversation with everybody in the room why that matters.
Yeah. And my favorite question, like when I'm in a position of being a consultant on a hiring decision, the most effective question I found to ask is explain to me what basis you have for expecting this person to perform well.
Hmm.
That's all that matters, right? Tell me, what have you learned about this person and what they want that says what we have to give them will bring their best performance out of them, because that's how we're going to get our money's worth. And oftentimes people don't have an answer for that. They're like,
Yeah.
well, they meet the job description requirements. I'm like, well, that tells us that they can perform the function that we need from them. That tells us nothing about whether we can actually motivate them to give us that performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
And if you that's what matters in a hire. That's what matters in a team member. It's not if they can do the job. It's if they want to do the job. And this is another really important thing I really need leaders to hear and embrace, is that the paycheck's not magic, guys and gals. Like, the pay is a commodity.
Hmm.
It's not a differentiator. Now, the amount of pay may be a differentiator, although in today's market, there is rarely, pay that is genuinely motivating, especially in architecture. But like, the fact that you give them a paycheck gives you no basis to believe that they're going to be happy to have a job. They can get a paycheck literally anywhere. So you can't just sit there and say, well, they'll do whatever I tell them and they'll put up with whatever I give them because they're getting a paycheck. And the more that you get down the generational line, millennials and Gen Zers especially, the more their relationship with income changes. And especially Gen Zers, they are very comfortable with getting their income from a variety of sources.
Hmm.
They're very comfortable with a fragmented income ecosystem in their life. Also, loyalty means nothing to them. Because right now, even the oldest Gen Zers are only 5 years post-university, if you consider the average undergrad age being around 21 or 22 years old. If they go into the full-time workforce right after undergrad graduation, they're only been in the workforce 4 or 5 years max. In those 4 or 5 years of time, it's been basically constant layoffs. It was COVID, and then it was economic crash, and then it was return to office and that whole battle. Loyalty has no place in Gen Zers' concept of employment.
Yeah. Layer in the gig economy, right? As another, like, very transactional from the company side and the individual side. When do you want to work? Whenever I want to work, right? And how much you just work when you need a little bit of money, and then you don't need to work anymore, right? Like, so this very transactional nature of the way technology has kind of shifted
Yeah.
the way that income happens, and to disperse it and diversify is actually pretty smart, right? All of their eggs aren't in one basket,
Exactly.
but it's maybe not the way we do it, right? Like our generation, and so therefore it's like not even a concept that we could
Yeah.
embrace, but it's very real to those generations.
And when you add in the nihilism that we talked about earlier, that is a defining factor of most of Gen Z, you have this baby boomer or Gen X leader that says, no, you got to be loyal to the company, and don't you care about ambition
Why
and
aren't you
achievement?
sleeping under your desk? Yeah, right,
And they're like, are you freaking kidding me?
right.
Like, no, I don't give a crap. I'm literally just here for the paycheck, and I can get a paycheck thousands of places, and I'm completely comfortable with that. And so I think that it's difficult. It's difficult for older leaders, and I'm including myself in this, Gen Xers and baby boomers. It's difficult for us to acknowledge and embrace, but we do not actually have the hand that we believe we do.
Mhm.
We are very often playing a hand in our leadership decisions that we don't actually hold. And I think the reason why we misunderstand today's workforce is because we are looking at other people through the lens of ourselves. And millennials and Gen Zers, whoever's not in our own generation, this goes both ways in the timeline, but
Yeah.
each generation has such a different relationship with employment. And that's going to dictate how they're going to respond to things and how they're going to navigate things. And it's just it's wild. It's fascinating from a sociological perspective. It's also really challenging to lead through from an actual tactical perspective.
I often think of architects as psychologists on a few different levels, inside the office, but also with clients and things like that. This is another level to that, right? When we talk about this intergenerational ways of thinking, these different frameworks, and kind of navigating that, whether you're trying to move up in a company or if you're just trying to lead a team in a company, it kind of doesn't matter where you are. You have a different set of challenges because you're dealing with people in these different, like Gen X is kind of that sweet spot, and sweet spot's not necessarily the right word here, right? Because it's like, it's a tough spot to be in, where you're in the middle of the boomers and the millennials and Gen Z, and you have to kind of translate between all of them. You're at the center of multiple different belief systems and vocabularies and expectations and all of those things. It's a tough spot to be in. But the other generations don't have it a lot easier, right? Like they're still dealing
Correct.
with the multiple levels of, different, the same kinds of things from a different perspective.
Yeah, like every generation has both strengths and challenges. However, because the consolidation of senior authority, of like the most influential decision-making authority, is consolidated among boomers and Xers, I
Hmm.
think that millennials and Gen Zers have it harder.
Yeah.
I'm very
Yeah.
comfortable saying that because they're only on the receiving end. Now, also, a lot of millennials are now in middle or senior leadership as well. We also have a lot of Gen Zers who are company founders. So, like, it's not a one size fits all, but in general, the most common template is you've got boomers and Xers making decisions for companies and firms, and then millennials and Zers having the lowest amount of authority and resources to absorb the impact of those decisions, but also under the greatest level of expectation to absorb the impact of those decisions. And those decisions almost always represent the perspective and thinking of the generation who made the decision,
Mhm.
not the generation who's going to be doing the majority of the complying with it and the
Right.
executing on it, which to me, again, from a business standpoint, is so illogical.
Yes.
Because what you do when you basically saddle somebody with a, something to execute that is so foreign to how they behave and think, what you're doing is you're adding friction into your operation at scale. And when you add friction, you are increasing the distance between you and your revenue. You're increasing the distance between you and your money. Why would you do that? If you can avoid it, why would you do it? And I have to say, so many of my conversations with senior leaders who are Xers and boomers, a lot of them boil down to me just asking the person, okay, are you trying to win outcomes or are you just trying to win the argument?
Right.
Like,
Yep.
you have the power to decide which one you prioritize, but
Yeah.
are you applying legitimate business logic here, or are you just trying to dig your heels in because you're upset that the kids won't do what you tell them to?
Or protect your position, or yeah, there's one of my favorite new to me definitions of leadership is helping other people win, and I think that is a super straight to the point and fresh take on the actual goal of leadership.
Well, yeah. And so I think we got to talk a little bit about AI here because we're breathing. But AI does always come up in this conversation because there's always somebody, who thinks they're the smart person in the class. And like, what about AI? Why do I have to worry about people? Aren't people going to get replaced by machines? And I always pull out this little chestnut, which is Deloitte has found that still today, more than 80% of all corporate assets in the US are created by humans. And so what that tells us is that even if there is a future where the majority of business results are created by AI rather than by humans, that's not today. And we all have to go to work today, and we have to lead today and take care of our people today and generate business growth today. And so another thing I call leaders to be honest with themselves about is how much of your fixation on AI is just really nursing a fantasy of having machines free you from the difficulties of leading humans.
Yeah, the burden of leadership.
And I think that when people start to get honest with themselves about it, they realize, oh yeah, I am holding back on things I know that I need to do, lessons I need to learn, changes I need to make on how I behave as a leader, because I've got this fantasy. I'm believing that someday X number of my staff will be replaced by machines. Well, that might be true.
Why wouldn't it be you?
Right?
I know,
right? That might be true, but that's not going to be for a while, even if it does happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I always call out is this. In my opinion, the threshold of how much AI comes into our businesses is not going to be determined by what tasks it can do and what operational efficiencies it can provide. It's actually going to be capped by what amount of money your buyers and your customers are comfortable handing to a machine. That's it. That's what's going to dictate the cap of usability and feasibility for AI in your business. So now we know that we've been working with AI in our lives in ways we weren't aware of for a long time, but now people know. Now it's common knowledge. And there are studies that show that customer satisfaction and even just task completion, interaction completion in a customer service interaction, when the customer is aware of the fact that they're interacting with an AI chatbot or an agent, like a phone agent, it craters. I mean, we're talking like from the high 80s to 14%.
That's really interesting. I've heard a story that, or a report that kind of talks about the opposite, and they used it for communication between patients and doctors. And I think a lot of times in the medical record system, right, doctors write, that's where all of your messages to and from your doctor go through. And so there's like an incentive to be brief, right? Because time is, that's what doctors are doing. They're like, I need to get in and do this thing. It's like very short answers. They implemented AI and they did a big study, over tens of thousands of people. and the interactions with the AI, and people knew that they were told afterwards, and then they did a survey on satisfaction of your interactions, and they were much higher for AI because it had way better bedside manner than the doctors actually did themselves, because
Sure.
time is money, and they don't have the incentive of spending a lot of time on the messages. So you can see in different ways it might be beneficial. I just threw that out there because
you're right.
What you just said was very different than what I had heard, but very different study.
Well, the context matters. Yeah, this is not a
Sure.
one-size-fits-all thing. Also, I think that the disposition that the customer has to that environment or that service isn't going to dictate their response.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of people who are thrilled to participate in the healthcare system when they need to. So,
or customer service in general, right?
yeah. But so I've been running kind of my own experiment, and I asked this about 400 people now. So I'll ask them 2 questions, and they're usually leaders in a company. And I'll say, okay, what's the largest amount of money you're comfortable handing to a machine in a completely humanless experience? Whether it's like just an ATM machine or online shopping or an AI chatbot or an AI phone agent. And the most common and the most average answer is $5,000.
That's higher than I would have thought.
Then I will ask them, okay, and what's the average transaction amount you need to maintain for your business to hit your goals this year?
Uh-huh.
And it's almost always higher than $5,000.
Sure.
And so I say, well, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Why are you expecting your customers to respond positively to something that you yourself are not going to respond positively to? And in these examples, usually like the average transaction amount is like $87,000, right? These are usually sales organizations. So
Sure.
it's a significant amount of money. It's a really significant difference. And now for companies where, they work at lower transaction amounts, it's not as much of a problem. But for companies that need to move large amounts of money on average in every transaction, it's a significant problem. Because still, the way that buying happens is it's a human or a group of humans handing a pile of cash to another group of humans.
Yeah, right.
And that's where I think that leaders have to get honest with themselves about the value of human employees, of human resources in the age of AI.
Yeah.
It does not abdicate leaders from the responsibility to be curious about people and to explore their people's motivations and to understand what they will need to give to retain those people and extract their top performance. And also, I think we would need to be willing to embrace the very clear financial benefits of satisfying people and retaining them over replacing them and treating them like they're disposable.
That was a sweet summary right there. I felt like you just put the period on the end of the sentence. I would love it if maybe you can tell people where they can find out more about this. I mean, this is obviously, you're super passionate about this. You obviously know a ton about it. So give people a destination where they can learn more about this.
Sure. So the 2 main places, philputnam.com, that's my website, and then also LinkedIn. So you can find me on there. It's linkedin.com/PhilPutnamSpeaks. And then I've written a book about it. So the model of discovering people's motivations and knowing what to do next, the how is called Desire-Based Leadership. And you can find it on Amazon or you can order it from philputnam.com.
Nice. I'll have links to all that in the show notes for this episode. Phil, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.